Hi everybody, my name is Sukaja and welcome back to the Bookish Bulletin YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about 5 books that you can read in no time at all. All these books are less than 250 pages long, and if you're looking to fast track your reading goals at this time of year, given that we're already 6 months into 2024, you are experiencing a mid-year book freakout, then I would recommend that you read these 5 books. All the 5 books I'm going to talk to you about in this video are written by women. All these books are going to leave you with a lot to think about, so definitely stick around and watch the rest of the video. Woman Eating by Claire Corda. Now this book is something I decided to pick up because I found the title to be really intriguing. It's about a vampire, but it's not your average vampire story. So what Claire Corda does is she takes the vampire trope and uses it as a metaphor to kind of speak about things that are really, really important, but she does it in a very indirect way. So in this book, you meet a vampire who is pretty lost. She's like in her early 20s. She wants to do her internship in art history, and therefore she's going to work at an art studio. Her dad was an artist and her mother is a vampire as well. But there's a lot of identity conflict here because she is living in the United Kingdom, but she's not white British. She's Asian, in fact. That I think plays a significant role in this book. Do not read this book when you're hungry because it's going to have your mouth watering, given that there are so many descriptions of food here. The protagonist is slightly obsessed with food. Okay, slightly is an understatement. She's really obsessed with food. For her, food is difficult to find because she's essentially a vegetarian vampire. I think I've said enough about this book to intrigue all of you right now, but I'm still going to say a few more things. This book is very unlike any other vampire story that you would imagine. It does not do the usual thing. Instead, Woman Eating is about prioritizing your needs, and it's about like finding food in a world that doesn't, accept you, and how do you survive, how do you sustain in a world where it's not easy to be yourself and things like that. It's a fun read overall. Yes, it's also slightly depressing at times, and trigger warning, this might not be the most suitable book for somebody who is having an eating disorder, and it can be a little frustrating for some of us because the protagonist is somebody who doesn't find food easily, and there are moments where she just spirals and has episodes of mental breakdown. Aside from that, I think this was a very unique read, and I really appreciate how well Claire Corda handled this subject, and it was done very tastefully, even though it does deal with some heavy themes. But at the same time, it is also using the vampire trope to explore identity. So I found it pretty fascinating, and if anything I said even appealed to you slightly, this book is definitely worth giving a read. So that was Woman Eating by Claire Corda. Next book I'm going to talk to you about, Why Be Happy When You Can Be Normal by Jeanette Winterson. So Jeanette Winterson is an extremely famous author, especially in the United Kingdom. I've heard of her books before and I wanted to pick them up because particularly this book is a memoir, and memoirs have always intrigued me. So recently I came across a list on Instagram that talked to you about books to read if you're feeling lost in your 30s. And I identified with that title, and some of the books really sounded very cool, and this was one of the books on that list. So I started reading this and it immediately sucked me in. The narrative style of Jeanette Winterson is just brilliant, and she has a way with words. She has a way to describe things. Some of the writing is not really linear. It does go back and forth in timelines, and she talks about her childhood, and she also mentions in the memoir that this writing project was essentially something that she hopes will heal her and will help her come to terms with, her experiences of the past. I thought this was just brilliant, and it's a great example of a good memoir. So if memoir writing is something you're keen on, memoir writing is nothing but self-writing, and if this is something you want to explore, then definitely read this book. It talks about the author's struggle because she was adopted as a baby. So that left her feeling like she doesn't know who she really is for the longest time. So she had like an identity crisis, and then she realized that she wasn't very happy in the house where she was brought up because the woman who was bringing her up as her new mother, supposed mother, was very difficult and very cruel to her. And all of that is written about in extensive detail in this book. But she also mentions a lot of literary quotes in here, and she talks about how literature came to help her when she felt there was no light, when she felt she was in the dark and there was no way out. It was literature that saved her, and that gave her hope and a sense of direction in her life. So this is a very inspiring memoir because the author ends up going to Oxford and getting an education, pretty much a self-made woman. This is also about exploring gender identity, which the author does in her writing. She tries to create a space for herself in literature, and that's also something she wanted to do from the very start. So I thought this was just a very wonderful piece of work, and if any of what I said appealed to you, definitely pick this up. So, things in this book, they will stay with you long after you've read them. Some of the episodes that she describes, some of the early memories that she writes about, essentially to heal herself of that trauma, they are really like significant, and it's going to give somebody hope for sure. Like, this is that book, if you're feeling low, you should definitely read this, because this will make you feel like you have such a good life, and things can be so much harder for a lot of people out there. So that was this book. Next, I'm going to talk to you about my favorite read of the recent months, and that is A Woman in the Polar Night. And this book is just chef's kiss. This book was by far one of the best books I've read this year, and it is a book that was written in the 1930s, so somewhere around 1937. And it's about a woman who goes to the Arctic Circle to accompany her husband on an expedition for a year. And she spends an entire year in that place. And it's pretty much, back in the day, it used to be known as a godforsaken place. There was no sufficient sunlight for like 6 months. It would be in complete darkness. And for the next 6 months of the year, it would be really, really bright. So you would have to adjust and be able to survive in that kind of harsh climate. And our author talks about the challenges that she faced initially adjusting and getting into a sort of routine, and also living in a very, very tiny space. It was a hut that could accommodate 3 people, but they lived in bunk beds, and they didn't have. She talks about the minutiae of day-to-day life in the Arctic, and how they had to live like hunters and gatherers, gathering food, because obviously back in the 30s, the Arctic Circle was pretty much untouched. And while today we all go on cruises to Svalbard and things like that, back in the day, a lot of the parts of the Arctic Circle were unexplored and uncharted territory. So she's even drawn a map in the beginning of the text, and this is such an intriguing book, and it transports you to the North Pole. It pretty much does, because you feel like you're actually there, and you're witnessing things like a seal in front of you coming out of the waters, the pitch black night, the whiteness of the vast landscape outside. All of that is described so well, and she talks about the beauty of a white landscape, and the way she describes it is just mesmerizing. So I really, really enjoyed this novel, and I would highly recommend it. And it's hopeful. It's a travel narrative in some senses. It's also a personal, a bit of a biography of her time in the Arctic, but it's just so nicely written, and I highly recommend this book. Now, my 4th book recommendation is for those of you who love literary fiction, and for the literary fiction enthusiasts, this book is The Department of Speculation by Jenny Orfel. This book is basically about a marriage, and it kind of draws a portrait of a marriage, but the style and the approach is what distinguishes this novel. This book is kind of like a series of vignettes and paragraphs which are all fragmented, so you won't really get a very linear narrative. There is a protagonist, but she doesn't have a name, and she's described as the wife. And it talks about the daily domesticity and the life of a married woman, and also when she becomes a mother, how her life changes. And there are ups and downs that are referred to throughout this novel, and highs and lows. But essentially, I think it's a very honest look at the different aspects of day-to-day life. You should read this if you love stylistic elements and things. This was one of those books, I think, that you can really appreciate, or you can really not relate too much. So it depends on the type of reader you are. And one of the things I liked most about this book is the fact that again it draws on philosophy and art and literature, and the author does infuse this narrative with everything from for the things that the Stoics and philosophers talked about to the Russian cosmonauts, because she's essentially a writer and she talks about how being an artist is tough, especially when you have domestic responsibilities and chores, and you also have a living being to look after. The things that happen when you're trying to approach your art, and the things that interfere with your mindset when you're trying to work on a particular form of art. So that is, I think, conveyed really well in this novel. So if anything of what I said describing this novel appeals to you, then definitely pick this up. And the final book I read is Laurie Moore's short story, which is titled Terrific Mother. So this is a very, very short read, and it's packed with so much and so much to unpack for readers who really, question what they're reading and analyze things that they read. So definitely pick this up, because it's kind of like something you need to unravel as you go along reading the narrative. So this book is about a woman, again, who is a protagonist, and she is in her mid-30s. She is child-free, and this novel takes place in a time that is described as a puritanical age, one where being complimented as being a mother is one of the highest compliments one can possibly receive. And in that situation, our protagonist, whose name is Adrian, ends up killing a baby. She is holding it and then she drops it and then it dies. And that happens at the very beginning of the novel, so slightly morbid beginning. And after that, it looks like she is ridden with guilt for what she's done, and she retreats into the attic of a house where she is in a very contemplative state for days on end. But prior to this particular episode, which is interestingly summed up in just 2 paragraphs in this novel, in this very short story, she has met somebody whom she is marrying and whom she has decided she's going to marry, because she feels in some senses that could be a fresh start for her, embarking into this life where she is a wife, and also her approach is very different. She's pretty much a very detached protagonist. This just follows her life with this newly married, in this newly married situation. She goes off to Italy, still having the guilt and everything of what she's done. But that isn't the focus of this novel. In the focus of the story is very open-ended and open to narration, open to interpretation. But what I think it essentially does is, towards the end, our narrator does obtain redemption in some sense. To be very honest, I found this book to be quite funny in multiple places, and it's got this very sarcastic tone and outlook towards the whole thing. So if any of this appeals to you, then do pick this up. And all I have to say is, all the books are so different from each other, but at the same time had so many elements that kind of interlinked and overlapped, and there were so many similarities. All of these books are about women and their experiences. We can't have enough about women's experiences, so yay, glad that the author has, all the authors decided to focus on that. And these are all pretty insightful books, even though they're really short. If you're looking to amp up the quality of your reading, then definitely consider reading these books. This is for all of you who have been following my channel but haven't yet hit the like and subscribe button. Please go and hit the subscribe button and give me a follow, because how could you not follow me, right? Okay guys, I will be back with more bookish content very soon. Thank you so much for watching this. Give yourself a round of applause, have a cup of tea, enjoy your day. I will be back with more bookish content soon. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sane, and happy reading. Bye.